Cardiff University Engagement Project that tries to help and support hyperlocal community news sector across the UK and internationally as well, if we can, and if anybody needs help and support. So we try and put on these events because basically we want to increase the quality of journalism at the hyperlocal level. We want to give people opportunities to learn these skills. They wouldn't normally otherwise learn them in any other kind of capacity. So we look at people who aren't specifically trained in journalism, not necessarily citizen journalists, but people in all walks of life really, who just want to kind of add to the debate and kind of have their say. And we want to make sure that they're trained properly and given the right kind of skills and tools so that they can do that job as best they can. And so that we have a really robust democracy built on really good quality journalism. So we put on these courses as much as we can for free to give you guys, people like you or any other people from different kind of organisations, comms, PR, whatever, so you can kind of get these skills for free. So this is JT, James Taylor, who is our technical demonstrator extraordinaire at Cardiff University, and he's going to show you all about VR and 360. If you're watching online, please do enjoy. Obviously you won't get the skills, you won't get the really hands-on experience from being in the room, so make sure you come here next time. But it should be a really good show, so I'll hand you over to JT.
Hello everyone. So just to get us started, because lots of faces, and it takes me a while to get used to people's names, what I'd like to do is just go around and just introduce yourself and just say where you're from and what you do really, just to break the ice a little bit, just get to know each other, because you will be working together in some way during this afternoon. Right? We will have some way of you getting hold of cameras and actually getting out and doing something that revolves around 360 video. So if we just start left and go round.
I'm Louise and I work in communications in the Central Communications Team at the University.
I'm Eloise and I manage the Centre for Community Journalism, and I'm hugely excited at the prospect of learning how to use 360 properly rather than just taking a photo in the middle of a room and going, oh look, it's in 360.
I'm Joe Towns, I work at Cardiff Met doing the sports broadcast masters, and I'm a freelance TV producer, so I'm quite interested in how 360 can be used in sport.
Okay.
I'm Darryl Cobner, I'm from Cardiff Met as well, and I do sports analysis, so video analysis, so interested in the tech.
Yeah.
I'm Debbie, I'm from the School of Engineering here at Cardiff University, and both engineering and physics have 360 cameras that we've been playing around with and using their headsets when we go out and do engagement events, so yeah.
Yeah.
I'm Jenny Rose, I'm a freelance digital media skills trainer, and so anything I can train up on, I will.
I'm Marie, I work for a charity called Commission Institute and I work in the Digital Communities Programme.
Okay.
I'm Sakara, I also work primarily at the Caution Institute, and which is to learn more about VR. We've got some VR technology at work. So.
Lovely to meet you all, thank you for coming. As Matt said, I'm the technical demonstrator at Cardiff University. My background though is in various things, media creation through marketing and promotion material for digital content. I'm an audio engineer by trade, but I've also dabbled in a lot of video content and video editor as well. And the reason why I've actually started looking at 360 content and VR in particular is because, in my opinion, that is the next stage in immersion in media content. So immersion has been going on for many, many years in the sense of we started off with still imagery, we then went black and white, then they added sounds, this is all standard film, then it went to full HD definition film projects, 3D, things like that. Radio as well is a way of immersing an audience within media content. 360 and VR is just the next stage. So, what is immersive media? So, well, before we start actually, just to give you an idea of what the aim is, this is an introduction to 360 and VR, okay? I've literally gleaned all the research, everything I know about VR and 360 and augmented reality into this to try and bombard you with as much information as possible in about 3 hours. Honestly though, I will try and keep it as simple as possible to make it so that you can adapt it then to your own areas. So this will literally be an introduction. We're not going to go into specific industries as such, but we are revolving this around how it can be used as digital storytelling or journalism. But this could be then applied to other areas. It could be applied to architecture, engineering, physics, all manner of areas that can be used for this. So, structurally wise, we're going to be looking at what is immersive media, why it is used and how it can benefit journalism and digital storytelling, what makes a good 360 story, the technology that you can use for the actual production, and also then some audio equipment that you could use in regards with alongside the cameras, plus audience consumption and how they are viewing the content and how this then has a direct relation on the production. Post-production, so we'll look at different ways of combining video content together and how it can be edited so that it can be outputted on social media, YouTube, and various other outlets. We'll have a quick talk about understanding your audience. So everyone's in this room is going to have a slightly different audience that they're going to be targeting. So it'll be interesting to see how you think what we cover might then be able to be used to target your specific audiences. And then we'll look, and this is all mainly specific to 360, we will be then looking at VR content and how you can create fully immersive VR CG, computer-generated content. I can spend a week talking you through how that's generated, but I'll be introducing you into how you can get started in creating that. I've got a couple of nice resources which are very easy to use. So, what is VR, AR, and 360 video? Now, have any of you experienced, or well, I take it you probably have experienced, some sort of 360 or VR or even AR? Yeah? 360 video is most common, so who here has actually seen 360 video, experienced it either on smart device without a head-mounted display or with a head-mounted display? Yeah? Full VR experiences, so computer-generated VR. Yeah? No? So a few people have, a few people haven't. And then augmented reality, AR. If you've ever played Pokemon Go, that is AR. Okay, that is the basic sense of augmented reality. But can you remember the Google glasses when they released as well? That was augmented reality. Good idea, badly done. But nevertheless, that is what augmented reality is. So they're the three main areas of immersive media. So virtual reality, we'll start with the big one. This is a fully immersive experience for your audiences. This is primarily used in the gaming industry, but there have been examples of being used for journalism, digital storytelling. And this is very much the high end of content. So you need very specialist skills to create this type of content. But they are making it simpler to do. Can everyone see these slides, by the way? Because I know the lighting's a little bit poor in this room. I should close the light. And the idea is that the audience has the ability to interact with elements within the experience. So they are more immersed into the content. They feel as if they are there. And this is to enhance that feeling of presence within the story or within the content. The next stage in evolution of virtual reality is they've started looking at creating additional sensory inputs, smell in particular, and actually being able to touch things and feel them, so you feel the full sensory effect of touching things within this digital environment. I've got a couple of examples here. If I can load it up. So this is an example of how it can be used in a digital story. Sadly, I don't have the full VR kit to actually get you to view it, but this works with the Samsung Gear VR, and it allows audiences to actually traverse and explore Chernobyl in a virtual reality setting. So this is mainly computer generated, but it does allow people to wander through. Whereas the traditional kind of 360 elements, or traditional VR, in the sense of you're looking at it through a head-mounted display like Google Cardboard, is you're still your stationary position. Unless the camera's moving, you do not move. The only thing you can move is your head to look around. This is a new way of going about getting that immersion to audiences. They can explore, they can traverse areas and actually look at different things in different ways. The other example is Discovery. The Discovery Channel have invested a lot of time into creating their VR experiences. If it loads for me, there we go. So they've got lots of content they're creating on a regular basis, and these are designed to be full VR experiences, so you can interact with your environments. I'd recommend downloading, so I've got some printouts of all the information I'm talking about. I will hand that out shortly, but they've got the links here and examples of how these different elements or how this different technology is used. I would recommend having a go at downloading these apps, these programs, and playing with them on your devices. And if you ever get a chance of using a Samsung Gear VR or Oculus Rift or anything similar on those lines, please take the chance to do so, because it is really interesting how it can be used. And then, as I said, all these elements can be applied to different industries in different ways. So, there is also the opportunity to use in virtual reality for learning experiences. I visited a company called Atticus in Cardiff Bay recently, and they've been using full immersive computer-generated VR for learning tools for different industries, including EDF. So they found that the retention of knowledge is far greater using experiences like this than it is with the standard 200 odd slides that go through health and safety or how to use different pieces of equipment. So their staff are trained using virtual reality, and it allows them to interact with things and they learn from that experience. Everyone has their own way of learning, their own preference in terms of how they learn. But what they found is 90% of the knowledge is retained through using VR, whereas previously it was between 30 and 40%. So that could be then applied for other areas, digital storytelling, journalism, sports as well. People could be watching a sports event and they'll actually remember that sports event because they were there experiencing it. As I said, augmented reality then, Pokemon Go will flash up a few times in this, because I think that is one of the best examples of how it's hit mainstream. So, augmented reality digitally enhances real life. It uses what the camera is seeing on the device or what you are seeing, and then digitally enhances that, overlays information on top of that. So in the sense of Pokemon Go, for example, it was using geometry to work out where the Pokemon were going to be, and then you could interact with those digital elements over your sofa or in a park. This is still in development, so we could see in the next few years that a lot of things are being developed for augmented reality. A lot of people are saying this is the next step. This is how we actually get it to mainstream audience. This is how we get consumers to purchase, get into this digital realm. The sales figures for things like Pokemon Go were through the roof. So this could be applied for different industries. Again, I'll go back to sports. Sports is one of the big areas I know have been looking into augmented reality, because they can digitally overlay information on sport profiles, data regarding certain games, things like that, on top of what's actually going on in real life. So if someone's actually at a sporting event, they'll be able to hold out their smart device and that digital information will be overlaid. Architecture have been looking into it as ways of digitally building properties that are only in their design at the moment, but being able to hold a device over where the estate is going to be built, and then this property is built digitally in a digital form so that they can then analyse it and see how it will look in real life. So this, I'm interested to see where this goes. And of course, the main topic we'll be looking at, which is 360 video. So 360 video, it's not classed as full immersion. There's a lot of places that call VR 360, they're both the same thing. There is a distinct difference between them. 360 video is not fully immersive, whereas a virtual reality is, in its name, it is a virtual reality. But they do work in the same way in the sense of you're trying to give your audience a presence within a place that they may not have ever been to. You are trying to immerse them into a story that they may not be able to partake in normally. For example, the war in Syria, that seems to be a big area where a lot of 360 content for BBC is being created. So normal people, their general target audience, would not normally go to Mosul on a day-to-day basis. But if people are interested in experiencing what's going on there and having presence within the story, then they can use 360 video content and a head-mounted display to try and give their audience a bit more presence within it. It can add a little bit more depth to the story than normally you would find. So it's supposed to be full spherical video content. We'll be looking at shortly, when we look at technology, how not all devices allow you to do full spherical video. But what you're aiming for is the ability for your audience to look up and see as you would do normally, look down, and they won't see their feet, admittedly, but they'll be able to look down to the very bottom where their feet would normally be. It's a flat image if it's monoscopic, so there's two variations. There's monoscopic and stereoscopic. Monoscopic is flat equirectangular image. Think of standing in the middle of a large dome and the image is projected onto that dome or that sphere. You are merely standing in the middle of it and can look around. That is what monoscopic is. So it's merely a projection onto a sphere that you are looking from inside. It's the most common form of output because it's quick and easy to create if you have the equipment, and it is supported by Facebook, Vimeo, YouTube, and if I remember correctly, Twitter are getting support for it as well. So it is more supported than the other form of 360 video, which is stereoscopic. And stereoscopic adds a 3D depth element to 360 video. So when you look at some of the examples, we'll have a look at the example shortly, then you'll see there's differences. So YouTube, for one, are one of the only ones that actually support stereoscopic 360 video. So you have that extra depth. If you're looking at on Samsung Gear VR as well, you can have that extra depth. So it adds that extra level of immersion to the content. It looks more realistic than it would do normally. And then, of course, live streaming, which has recently become quite a big thing for 360 video. So you have Facebook 360 live streaming, and Periscope or Twitter have their 360 live streaming, as well as YouTube. So you've got the different channels to output through. Have you looked at Facebook 360, Twitter 360? Anyone experienced it? No? It's an interesting concept in the sense that you could have something like this, and unlike traditional live streaming, where it's pointing at me in the front here, every element, every member of the audience, everyone in this room would be seen. So think about that. Think about the ethical implications of that as well. It's a very good idea because it does mean that you feel part of the event, you feel a little bit more immersed into what's going on, and with live comments and questioning as well, it can start really developing into a way of communicating to others within a conference or a space like this without actually necessarily being there. But much like anything, there's always implications. Just an example of monoscopic and stereoscopic. In fact, I'll show you this example because it demonstrates something that not everyone realises.
When you look at pressure like that,
This is supposed to be 360 video, but because it's automatically decided to play through Safari, Safari does not support 360 video playback. Right? So you are, I would probably say you're better off if you're creating any content like this, always view it back, preview it on Google Chrome. Google Chrome have put more support into 360 video because of course Google owns YouTube and YouTube were one of the first to actually introduce 360. So if I bring this now into Google Chrome, you'll see it in its full. So you have to do this like this. So you can imagine this then is how your audience could possibly view this content. Text overlays. You can see all around the image. So, of course, as you already know, this just adds an extra element of depth to content, so people can look around, see other things. We'll talk about what makes a good 360 story in a second, or what makes good 360 content. But this is probably one of the better examples I've seen. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Can anyone think why this works as a 360 video? Why might this work, whereas something along the lines of maybe even just us standing in this room, me standing here talking to you, and you all sitting around. What is the main element of this story?
The glacier.
The glacier, so it's the setting. So it's one of the key things to remember when doing 360 video or any content like this, is because of this perspective, because of how the audiences view it, you need to make the setting interesting. So stories about places work very, very well, because of course it gives the opportunity for the audience to look around, and you're talking about a whole place. Whereas if you're talking about a specific character, a specific thing, there's always the opportunity that your audience is going to look away at a key point and miss what it is you actually wanted them to focus on. We'll talk about ways of actually getting them to focus on content and focus on where you want them to focus in a bit. But it's one of the things you have to be aware of is if the content doesn't fit 360 or VR, then what's the point of doing it? Because you could just lose your audience. They may never come back to your content again because they don't understand what it is that you're trying to show them. Whereas with this, the story is indicative of the content, so they know that they're to be looking around at the glacier. That's what you're trying to show them. other example, which is 3D, I'll load into the devices and you'll be able to see that a little bit better, because it works better with head-mounted displays than it does on a desktop. It's still a flattened image on a desktop, whereas with head-mounted displays you've got two lenses and that gives you that depth. So, what makes a good 360 video? Well, before we actually go into that, we'll go back. I've got a couple of quotes here from people within journalism, people within various sectors of journalism, and what they think, because we're looking at this in a journalism perspective. There is a few quotes here from what people actually working in the industry think of this kind of technology, because there's a lot of skeptics out there. There's a lot of people who think, why do we need to bother with this? And because it's a growing industry, of course, it's still being developed, there's always going to be skepticism over how this technology and this media content can be used. But there are a lot of people who are actually quite willing to develop this and look into it in greater interest. So John McAndrew, Director of News Output for Sky News, has said that this new technology has enhanced our storytelling, giving our viewers a deeper and richer visual experience. For the first time, we can take viewers to the scene of a news story in a way that is more immersive than ever. The report gives viewers a unique perspective on the migration crisis, so they're talking about a story they did on Syrian migrants, by taking them inside the tents where people are living and seeing what's it like to stand on a crowded beach with possessions scattered along the shoreline. You get a new understanding of what is happening. I think that's one of the key things. You get a new understanding of what is happening. And that's not necessarily specific to journalism. That could be applied to all manner of industries. It's giving that new understanding, the opportunity for your audience to develop a new understanding of what it is you're trying to show them and how they can see these things. Jared Cole, the executive producer and video for Wall Street Journal, has stated that pretty much every person that I can get their headset on and show them one of the stories we've made starts spewing out ideas. War reporters are always very excited to say, you have to get me one of these cameras so people can see what I'm seeing. Again, people are seeing what I'm seeing. You're placing them within a story, you're placing them there at that time. They're reliving that action. Or in live streaming, they're reliving it with you at the same time. I won't go through all of this. It's very much, I've got the printouts here so you can read through them yourselves what the people are saying in journalism. But one thing that I will say is, or will point out, a lot of many people think that, or seeing this, it's a mobile-first world. So a lot of this content is developed primarily for mobile use. Being able to view it on a desktop like I just showed you isn't just an added bonus. It means that your target audience is slightly larger because people aren't having to rely on use of an up-to-date smart device. But the UN has found that more people have access to mobile phones than a working toilet. So, makes you think, doesn't it? If more people have access to mobile phones than a working toilet, but you're trying to create content for traditional forms of output, then are you going to hit as many people as you would do if you focused on mobile? And that goes for any form of media output, to be honest with you, whether it be 360 or standard video content, imagery, or anything like that. Varun Shetty, for the Business Operations Lead for VR team at New York Times, has said that mobile feels to me like the cleanest path to mass adoption of VR. I don't believe that next year people will be spending thousands of dollars on an Oculus Rift or HTC Vive. It's one of the biggest problems, one of the biggest barriers is the barriers of technology and required for fully immersive VR experiences, whereas 360, of course, does not rely on that. I think that will happen. I think that will happen eventually. In certain segments of people will spend that money, and if it does, we'll jump on them. So they're not saying that it's not going to work. People aren't going to go out and have head-mounted displays across the world, but it's not happened quite yet. But by developing this content for a mobile generation, you are effectively hitting more of an audience than you would do online. Right. So we will have a look at this content in a second on the actual head-mounted displays. But I just want to go over a few points in regards to what makes a good 360 video. Now this is based off of research I've done, talking to people who actually created 360 and VR content for marketing and promotion purposes, for journalism, real estate. But as I said, location, character and time are all important aspects of immersive storytelling. Location, I personally think, is one of the biggest. If it's a really interesting location that your character is in, then your audience are going to be far more enthralled by what you're showing them than if you've got a standard interview setting within a room similar to this. One 360 video I did watch when I first started researching into this was, has anyone seen it? It's a 360 video of Michelle Obama, and it has her full PR team and media team all around her, and it's just showing you what happens backstage at any of these big interviews, and you get to look around at every individual involved in that production. But because if you did that, it's going to be quite boring. What they've done is they overlaid graphics to give the audience additional information and different content to look at. Because it wasn't constant action within the actual video content. Things weren't always going on. It wasn't that interesting to watch on its own. But by overlaying graphical content that gave extra data, extra information to their audiences, it became slightly more interesting to view because you've got that extra information. But if you have a nice location, it means that people are going to look around, and there's a reason why they have to look around, why you want them to look around. Time are important, time as well. So when you are viewing, your audience are viewing any immersive content, 360 or VR or otherwise, time is an important aspect. As if you're trying to speed up or slow down time, or have a very disjointed view on what time, so traditional video content is cut in a particular way. And it doesn't always mean that time progresses as you would normally expect it to, because when people are viewing it in standard ways, via TV, desktop, or flattened image on their phone, they don't necessarily expect time to progress in the way they can see it normally, because they can just look outside and see that time is progressing normally anyways. But when you are in an immersive environment, when you are immersing yourself into this content, remember that you're trying to keep that immersion, keep that presence. If all of a sudden time jumps 3 days ahead, without any sort of indication why or that it's actually happened, then your audience is immediately going to be broken out of that presence, out of that immersion, and they are no longer going to be focusing on the story or the content you're trying to show them. They're going to be focusing on the edit. And one of the big things as an editor I know is hiding the fact you've edited is, from your audience, is the biggest thing. You need to make sure they're focused on content rather than the production. As I said, bring your audience to places that are not normally seen, creating a more visual experience that helps relate to the character. So if you have a particular character, whether it be a place or a person, bringing them into these new areas, bringing your audience into places they would not normally be able to experience, adds that extra depth. Content is king. It's something that, in my opinion, it speaks for all media output. Don't create 360 video if the content does not necessarily need it. Don't use technology just for technology's sake. So you always focus on the content, what it is you're trying to show your audience, what it is, story it is that you're trying to tell them. If it's relevant for 360, then yes, try it. If it's not, focus on the content. Make sure the content is excellent and that it's captivating before you start throwing technology at it. And story is paramount. So, those of you watching the live stream, I apologise, you're not going to be able to take part in this, but I've got some examples of different 360 video content that you can access, one of which is actually computer generated, and I've got Google Cardboard that everyone can use. So what we'll do is, if I make sure each box, so there's 2 in each box. And whilst you're viewing this content, I will hand out the printouts of all the information. Who's used Google Cardboards before? So, I've got devices here. I've preloaded material onto them, just to make things a little bit easier. So they should work fine. So, there. Up. To actually play it, there's a little bit of box. If you move your eye line, so when you put it over your eyes, move your eye line and tap the screen, which is why it's got that little space there, you should be able to tap it and play it. I'll try and get people started on these, and if anyone has any problems, give us a shout. It's a little bit difficult, admittedly.
So the buttons on there?
The buttons, no, because it's not quite big enough.
Okay. So,
Sorry, I'll give everyone a hand in a second just to make sure it's playing. Right, so this is some content by The Guardian.
Is that the
The 6x9. Have you viewed it? Yeah.
oh, I can't see anything.
Okay, that's the 6x9's Guardian one.
Is this the in solitary confinement?
Yes.
Big raining.
It's one of the problems with any of this content is, of course, because it relies on Wi-Fi connectivity, sometimes the image resolution isn't
Oh, it
perfect.
looks a bit more like video now.
Yeah. So this is called First Impressions. Again, Guardian content.
Yeah.
You'll see why it's slightly 6x9. Yeah. Go ahead, because I've got a few, so I'll hand out different ones. I was going to get different people to look at different ones. Okay, and then we've got. So this is New York Times specific. It doesn't always work out. So have you all managed to get content views? Is it all? Has everyone got any problems? Give me a shout. I've got an example of stereoscopic here as well. We talk about that added depth. Anyone wants to have a go with stereoscopic and see the difference?
If I play it, obviously. It's very difficult when you've got glasses on.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is all computer generated. So this is all generated using Unity. So it's still 360, it doesn't have that immersive effects, but they've actually created it in a computer generated environment. Just like yeah, this one. One of the issues is that it takes a while for your eyes to adjust to it. So what they suggest is when viewing content like this is don't try and look directly in front of you at the screen. Try and look as if you're looking beyond it, because then it merges the two lenses together as your eyes do normally.
Do you think this might damage eyes as a child when you think that?
I don't have a medical opinion on it.
No, but I could see like if I felt that much like.
Yeah, but I mean, I can only imagine it's not doing any more damage to your eyes than staying as a computer screen all day than it would do. Or or your phone, because a lot of people just use their phone now for social media, and a lot of our time is spent on our mobile devices. I can't imagine focusing on that is any different to really trying to look through that, particularly considering what you're looking at on the Google Cardboard. You're not looking at for prolonged periods of time, so 3 or 4 minutes. Yeah. One of the issues that a lot of people have found with it is it can create nausea. It can create, I have problems with my eyes in the sense of muscles at the back, I've got nerve damage. If I focus on something too long, I get very, very bad headaches. So I found that with Google Cardboard, as I've done the research, the more I look at stuff, and because I'm doing it quite regularly, my headaches start becoming more and more frequent. So you have to be aware that they're much like any form of viewing.
That's like overuse you've got.
Yeah.
Strain. Because I think all of these things, you know, I mean, we go mad for them, but actually we don't have to link the health impact.
With these, so these are classed as, I'll talk about the different variations of head-mounted disposable. These are classed as mobile, whereas the tethered devices, such as the Oculus Rift, because of the image quality, the resolution, and the fact that it's specifically designed to be worn, then you don't get as much of a strain
Because
on
I
the
can
eyes.
like my eyes are, you know, that's strain is important.
And admittedly, using mobile devices for it can be, which is why a lot of this content is created not only to be viewed on Google Cardboard, but you can view it as a standard 360 video content that you can just move your device around. Yeah, much like the desktop. Okay, so just to spur on some conversations in regards to this, after looking at those examples, and by all means have a look at some more as the day goes on. We've got a few variations of 360 content. What are your opinions on it? So by viewing that and thinking about those 4 things there, I wanted to start a discussion on your personal opinion on what you've seen and whether or not it works.
Yeah, it works.
How do you think it works? Why do you think it works? So who had the 6x9 Guardian content? So I did split it out a little bit so everyone had slightly different content. With the 6x9, who's actually seen the 6x9 Guardian app that they developed for 360? What about that content do you think works with the 360? Why have they done it in that way? Now that was a computer generated. The Guardian 6x9 is computer generated 360. It is not fully immersive. They designed this environment in a computer generated environment. They digitally created this environment. Those of you at home, download Guardian 6x9 app, please by all means, and have a look. It's very, very interesting. So what worked? Why do you think that worked? What didn't work?
I think they're trying to get you to feel empathy in terms of you feeling what it's like to be that person. So in that sense, I think it worked. But then I found it almost that because they kept adding to keep your attention and kept adding stuff to it, that I didn't feel that I did get really how boring it is to be in that space. So I kind of felt like initially it was like, oh, this could be terrible to be here for a long time. But then because they were kind of adding to keep you interested, it almost made it entertaining to be in that space.
Something I've noticed is, particularly with things like 6x9, is where you're trying to get the audience to really contemplate what it is you're showing them, what you're trying to get them to experience. particularly if they are playing the main character role within that setting, there's not many people who are willing to keep it going, to really get your audience, give the audience the sense of what it is they're seeing and what you're trying to get them to experience. Because there's the fear that they'll get bored or will think nothing's going on. So of course then you have to start adding content to keep their interest, to actually inform them of what they're seeing. But then of course there's that, it's that balancing act between, have you actually got your audience to experience what it is you want them to experience? So in that sense, the boredom or the tension of being in that claustrophobic environment with nothing going on, or do you need to add content to then kind of keep the continuation of that story? There is a great example of this where you are playing the part of a blind man, or a blind person, and it's a system you can get on Unity. We'll talk about Unity in a bit, but it's a game engine. And it's designed for Oculus Rift, so it's a full head-mounted display unit. But the premise of this content is you see images in the sense of sounds. So these, as people walk past you, the lights and elements change within what you see. But if there's no sound, it's completely dark. So if nothing happens initially, your audience may think, nothing's going on, it's broken, what do I need to do? So there is usually narration or a commentator who is explaining to the audience what's going on, how their story is developing, why they're seeing what they're seeing. Written text can be used, but as you say, sometimes it takes away from that immersive experience that you're trying to get the audience to actually build in their minds. Okay, so that is 6x9. Any other thoughts on 6x9 Guardian?
The fact that you're stationary isn't such an obstacle, I think, because it's a small space, and the idea is that you do feel a bit trapped and you do feel claustrophobic, and there's not much to explore, so the fact that you're stationary is, yeah, it's not such a...
Again, it comes back to content is key. So the actual story itself, it's why they've developed the app as they have, is because they know how the story is supposed to be developed, and they know that you don't necessarily need to fully interact with the environment to get that sense of claustrophobia. Okay, so who had the BBC content? It was the I can't remember what it was now. It was the poisoned ground. The poisoned ground. Yeah. So, your thoughts? Yeah. Well, I think a couple of people had it, but any thoughts on poisoned ground?
Well, it worked because the setting was the story.
Yeah. The BBC have been dabbling with 360 for a while now, and they seem to be putting more and more content out as time goes on. And what I have noticed is they use it very much to get the audience into a setting that they would not normally be in. And that works great. The environments that they show, there's another one which is the 360 camera is attached to an attack helicopter flying over Mosul. Not many audiences would normally hang out of an attack helicopter flying over Mosul, so it gives the audience an extra depth to the story so they can actually experience what it is. And it's informative as well because you are giving you information on what's going on as it happens. But yeah, setting, again, so location is one of the key things to think about when creating any of this content. I can't remember what else other people had now.
It was in a jungle.
Oh, with the, was it the VR one? Yeah. So that was just, that was stereoscopic. So that was just an example of adding extra depth. So it's a 3D 360 experience. It's just to show that extra depth. That is very useful with natural settings. It can be used for sporting events as well. However, I'll be a bit bemused if a football came straight at me in 3D. But there's different ways that this stereoscopic 360 can be used. As I said, it's not in the mainstream at the moment, it's not pushed out as much as monoscopic, so a flattened 360, but again, that's something that can be developed. It's something that people are experimenting with and trying to develop further. Anyone else? Any comments on the content
And
you
it's
see?
first year of life.
Oh yes, the first year of life, the first impressions. That is one of my favourites, but that's mine.
Yeah, no, it's in there. Almost gone journey to the edge, so some stuff moved on. Yeah, it was good to start with because everything's well out of focus, but it's good to get from a baby's perspective and everything was up high, so you're never actually down that low and looking up at things.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
When we look at the techniques of filming in 360, we talk about how we position the camera to give that audience the correct perspective of what it is you're trying to get them to experience. And the first impressions one's interested in the way that they use the camera correctly to get that impression, to get that characterization, get the audience to actually experience what it is they want to experience. Anything else?
Boxing.
The boxing,
Yeah.
the Sky, yes. Yeah, Sky have...
Yeah, I wasn't quite convinced for boxing.
Yeah.
Because once you've looked at the crowd once or twice, you're back on the main action, you're possibly better watching the live coverage. Same with football, it sort of doesn't, once you've looked at the crowd, it's about it. I'd quite like to see it, that surfing clip, the idea of being able to see the whole wave on the beach. I think any sport where you can put the camera in the middle,
Yeah.
or like on the back of a racing car in Formula 1, you could look. But when you're sort of looking at the boxing ring, it doesn't really give you much
It doesn't add
advantage.
to it, does it?
You know, apart from being able to look at the front row now and again.
Yeah. I mean, one of the reasons why I chose that was to see how using 360 doesn't always work.
Yeah.
It's not always a necessity to do something in 360 just because you can. So with boxing, football, rugby, things like that, unless you can position the camera in a way that allows the audience to see things they wouldn't normally see.
Where was the camera in that? Was it above the ring?
It was a few places around the ring,
Yeah.
but just, you get a better look at the fight on traditional coverage.
Yeah. But if you can get a camera in a position that is not normal, not normal broadcasting set, then that adds interest, it adds extra depth. So you could have a 360 camera directly above a fight.
Yeah.
That would add an extra element to what the audience is seeing. But of course then you've got to think about the fact that they're looking down now on what's going on. So you'll have a lot of people wondering about that. But yeah, I mean, not everything works with 360. So it's understanding what works and what doesn't work. Anything else?
The New York Times.
Oh yes, New York Times, yes.
That was really good.
Yeah.
Thanks for that.
New York Times, I don't know if you all downloaded the New York Times app, but if you haven't, please do. The New York Times have some excellent 360 content, really good content. They've been experimenting with different ways of filming, they've been experimenting with monoscopic and stereoscopic and things like that. And they have something called the Daily 360, which I try to keep an eye on daily. And they are trying to push content out every single day and really engage with the audience. Not everything works, but there's a good few examples of different ways to use 360 for different types of stories. Okay, so moving along. Any questions before we look at the technology? Has anyone got any questions at all? No? Okay, so technology-wise, have you seen 360 cameras? Do you know what they look like? Yeah. I've got a couple of examples. which I will hand around and we'll hopefully get a chance to have a little play with. They should be fully charged now. I won't hand them around just yet. So you've got the 360 camera. There's a few examples here. So you've got, I take it, you're familiar with the GoPro rigs, where it's multiple GoPro devices all connected in some way so that you've got a full spherical 360 capture. That's the camera, so that would be like the high-end stuff. We'll talk about different budgets in a second for cameras. Then, of course, sound is one of the biggest misses sometimes on 360 video. Sound is an important role on any video content, whether it be traditional or 360 or VR content. So we'll be looking at different ways of recording sound, from the more expensive variations to actually something that will cost you about £120 and do a pretty good job. And then we'll look at playback devices such as the Oculus Rift. So, cameras. Now I've got a couple of examples of cameras. Pick them both up. Pretty certain thing, but yes. So there are a lot of cameras out on the market at the moment. Those of you who said that you've got equipment available to you at the moment, what are you currently using?
The Theta.
The Theta?
Yeah.
Anyone else? Who else had access to? Oh, you've got the HTC Vive.
Yeah.
Yes. So that's a virtual reality headset, HVAC display. So that will allow you to play back content, but you won't be able to actually create content with it. But we'll look at how you can create content with that instead. So these are a couple of examples. I was hoping to have another example, a brand new camera which has been released quite recently, in the last couple of weeks, which is the Garmin 360 camera. But these are cameras which cost no more than £500. There are some limitations to each one, but we'll look at those in a second. So if you want to pass, the Ricoh, start here, I'm going to pass it round, and then the Kodak, if you want to have a quick look at that, and just pass that round. So as you can see, these cameras aren't very big. So these are what we would class as prosumer, really. These are not the big high-end cameras that you can purchase, but they do a pretty good job in creating 360 content. The Ricoh Theta SC, which is currently going round, there is also the Ricoh Theta S, is simple to use, one button to actually start capturing video content or take a 360 photo. It will link to your mobile device through Wi-Fi, so you can preview what the content that you're filming or taking image stills of. And it has a storage capacity, if I remember correctly, please, if you know more than me, I think it's 16 gigabytes, if I remember correctly. Maybe wrong, but I believe it's 16 gigabytes. But that's enough storage to film a reasonably HD, well, it's not classed as full HD, but it's good quality image for half an hour. So that's low budget. So you've got the Ricoh Theta S and SC, the LG 360 camera, the Insta360 Nano, which is a device which connects directly to an iPhone. And if I remember, I do believe they have released something to connect to Android devices using USB-C as well. So that is just something that connects. In fact, it's that there. I'll hand over the printout of the slides so you've got that view. But the
That's something you can put on your phone.
But yeah, so that connects direct to your Apple phone or your Apple device, and
What's it called?
it's the Insta360 Nano. Let's double check. So this is just printouts of the slides, so you can make notes on these, Ivan, and you can see some of the images a little bit better.
How much is that Insta360?
Last time I checked, it was about £200. So all of the low budget cameras, they keep going down in price as new equipment is being released, but the majority of those are around £200, £250. Samsung Gear 360 is one of the best devices on the market. There's a few issues with it in terms of resolution, but it is pretty good. The company I went to see in Cardiff Bay, Atticus, have been using Samsung Gear equipment for quite some time. And the majority, well, all of these cameras will combine the two lenses. So the Ricoh Theta SC, which is over there now, you see it has two lenses, one either side, which creates that 360 spherical image. But it records each lens separately. So the majority of these cameras will actually stitch, what we call stitch, the content together to get that full 360 output, which can then be directly put onto social media like Facebook or direct onto YouTube. Does not need to be edited. Nothing post-production wise needs to be done unless you really have to.
So what file type does it come out? I think it's .what?
It's an MP4 standard.
Still MP4.
Because of the file sizes, because of how many pixels there are being filmed and being recorded, MP4 is one of the best formats because it compresses it down without losing too much quality.
Yeah.
Whereas the file size is going to be absolutely huge. Mid-budget then, I call it prosumer, but they are just mid-budget 360 cameras really. But you will see them being used by professionals because sometimes it's easier to get hold of a mid-budget camera which has good output, good quality output, rather than have to hire a full iRig, GoPro rig, or any of the professional cameras which we'll look at today. The Kodak SP360 4K, which is this little box here, it's the PixPro SP360. This is one camera. It only has one lens. So the problem with this is it has to be pointed upright for you to get a single hemisphere. It does not do full spherical 360 with a single camera. But you can pick up the dual camera rig for around £700, which comes with two cameras and then an attachment to combine the two. Kodak are releasing it's the Kodak Orbit 360, which is a dual lens camera which is supposed to have the same quality output as two of these. They've just combined it into one device to make it easy for people to use. It has yet to be released. They said June, haven't heard anything. But there are other cameras in this mid-budget range, such as the Garmin Verb 360, which I was hoping to have today to show you. The Nikon Key Mission 360. You've got the 360 Fly, which is single lens, but it has better angle, so it picks up more of a 360 image than a single one of these would. I'll show you what I can pick up with one of these in a second, because I've actually created some content using this. But the image quality on this is better than the Ricoh. So if you want a better resolution image, higher quality image, two of these will give you better than one of those. But there are complications, extra processes to go through to get the images together to full spherical. But I've got content I can show you. A student of mine used that camera there to create a 360 video of Cardiff Market, and it worked very well. But it was a panoramic video rather than full spherical 360. And then professional cameras, the expensive ones that range from about £5,000 upwards. You've got the Nokia Ozone. You've of course got the GoPro Odyssey, which is this cylindrical. It's really just a holder for all of the GoPros that go in it. But the price of that includes the price of the GoPros. The Zcam S1.
How many GoPros does it contain?
I think it's 12. But it varies. Different enclosures house different amounts of GoPros. So you can get enclosures for 4, 6, 8, 12. I think they've got 16 as well. But they're all made by different manufacturers. The Zcam S1 is something that actually creates very good full 360 content, but at about $2,500, far more than I can usually afford. But it is still a professional camera. It still has very, very, very good output, but it's just a lower price band than, say, the Nokia Ozone or GoPro. So if you have $2,500 spare, have a look at it. Sfericam 2 and the Aura 4i, again, expensive professional 360 cameras. You don't have to go out and buy these though. There are a lot of places you can hire this equipment.
So when you say MP4, which is the compressed, is that compressed when it's on the web, or is that the raw format of the footage when it comes off the cameras?
The raw format for the majority of these cameras is MP4, yes.
So it's compressed, is it?
It's a compressed format as recorded, yeah.
So will there be in the future uncompressed ever?
I would imagine so, but the storage required for that
Really
would be quite large. AVC HD, for example, you would probably see double the size of the files currently.
Yeah.
Filming with the Ricoh, a 30-second shot was about 256 megabytes.
Mm.
So double that again for AVC HD. That's probably quadruple that for AVC HD.
You know, like in a traditional frame,
Yeah.
you've got like 144. You know, they've got a certain number of pixels.
Yeah.
How does that work with the 360 thing? Or is it different for each one of the cameras?
Well, each of the cameras have a slightly different resolution they can be filmed at.
Yeah.
So the highest resolution I've currently found for mid-budget prosumer is the Garmin Verb 360, which is 5.7K. So 5.7 thousand. But that's not a direct relation to exactly how many pixels there are. I mean, there's more like 8,000 or so.
Right.
Whereas the GoPro Odyssey, you've got 12 cameras all shooting at 4K.
So it's massive, yeah.
It's huge, absolutely huge. So yeah, storage is one of the big issues. We'll look at that when it comes to the actual production side of this.
So really none of these are kind of definitive because they seem to be experimenting with different ways to change. So it's not like we've got to It's a bit experimental still.
It's still, yeah,
Very
people are still experimenting with this technology. So as more and more people experiment and people develop it further, you may find that the low budget cameras skip up to mid-budget, so you get the same resolution as you would do for these mid-budget cameras. With the low budget stuff, a mid-budget will skip up to professional, and professional will just go through the roof.
But they would probably be wanting to achieve like raw, you know, totally uncompressed, no MPEG on it at all, really, wouldn't they?
Yeah.
As they would with cinema.
Yeah, yeah. The creative industries, such as film, are creating 360 content or experimental 360 content in raw, uncompressed formats. But they have the
More than
capacity.
5K, that's it.
Yeah, they have capacity to do that.
But you have to have DVI. Should you go with the screen that can, you know, the screen that can take that.
Yeah. But I mean, for traditional content, excuse me, traditional content anyway, if it's going online, it's being compressed into a format that is usable on YouTube or social media.
It's
So,
just that when you compress.
yeah, it may have been YouTube as well.
Yeah.
But there are cameras available for all kinds of budgets. That's one of the key things we need to think about. Is if you want to experiment with this format, I wouldn't immediately jump into paying upwards of £500 for a single camera, upwards of £400. Have a go at Samsung Gear 360, see what kind of content you can create with that. The Insta360 Nano, as I said, will attach to a device. So that's very useful for live streaming of events or live reporting if you're thinking of journalism. And then of course the Ricoh Theta S is very simple to use. The video quality isn't as good as some of the other cameras, but it's a stepping stone into 360 video.
At the moment, because the number of pixels, you know, and the sheer amount of information, so like sports, they find, you know, because that's, you know, so moving, say football matches and things like that, and that get like quite complex.
Yeah, the
data.
sports industry who are, those who are actually looking at 360 are using some expensive equipment.
Yeah.
So you're talking of huge network drives, jaunt cameras or GoPro rigs, things that record in the highest resolution they can, so they can still zoom in on the action without losing quality. But the storage they require for that is huge.
So they won't be taking it out to little local gigs.
Unlikely. Unlikely.
Is that GoPro 360 one? Does it have the up and below image?
Well, the wide-angle lenses are designed to pick up horizontal and vertical, so they should pick up top and bottom as well once all combined. You'll sometimes find that there is a very small amount missing, but they usually do in post-production, then they'll fill that, they'll composite something into that space. So audio. As I said before, audio is an important part of any content created. Most of the 360 cameras that you can pick up off the market will record audio direct into them, and it's automatically synced with the video. The big aim for immersive media is something called spatial audio, which is spatial placement of sounds within this 360 environment. And not all cameras are able to do that. So you may find that, particularly if you're using like GoPros, you've got multiple channels of audio and they're all just being recorded over mono or stereo. Spatial sound is really just to add that spaciousness. It adds that extra depth to the immersion so it feels more realistic. But you can achieve basic spatial sound through one of these. So it's a Zoom H2N. I've got 4 here actually for you to have a look at. The idea is you should be able to go out and have a go at filming. So, take that, have a look at that. So these are about £120 each.
120.
About £120.
Okay.
Those of you at home watching, so you can see, it looks like that. And these allow you to record surround sound. So this can be attached to the tripod or next to the camera, or beneath the camera above it. And this will allow you then to record surround sound around the device. So you've got a spatial element to that sound, that audio recording. This can record in 4 channels. So what you'll find is most spatial sound is split up into 4 channels. You've got front left, front right, back left, back right. And then for full 3D and sonic sound, you have both top and bottom. This will record front left, front right, back right, left, back right. It won't record up and down, but for the majority of 360 content, that's not necessary. When you're getting into full VR experiences, then yes, you may find that full 3D sound is where to go. But we are, what we're aiming for is a full 3D soundscape eventually. But at the moment, to create that, you need specialist equipment. So ambisonic microphones or a microphone array where microphones are pointed in all directions. One ambisonic microphone which captures 3D sound is the Sennheiser Ambio VR microphone. If you look it up, it's about £2,500. I'd love to get hold of one to have play with, but again, don't have £2,500.
If most people are watching this content on their mobile, how many mobile phones support playing back the sound if you've got?
Well, if you're looking at it in 360, as you are looking around, with spatial audio, you should find that the audio placement will align with what they're seeing. With full 3D sound, of course, then you need specialist playback equipment to fully experience that immersiveness. But you can do it with stereo recordings. In post-production, we will look at that, talk about that in a second, but you can what we call upmix. So you can upmix a stereo recording to then, you're just copying left and right and then delaying it so that it is a duplicate copy in the rears. Almost like a reflection.
Yeah, so the software playing back the 360 video as well as knowing where you're looking, it's basically putting the sound.
It's a surround sound,
where
yeah.
The sound
it's creating a surround sound. So it's not quite 5.1.
Yeah.
It's more 4.0.
Yeah.
So it's just playing that back.
But it's a sort of mixing the 2 closest channels to where you're looking to make it.
So would the whole 3D thing be 6.1 then?
It's more.
Or 6.0?
It's 6.0.
Yeah.
I haven't been able to experiment with 3D sound fully, but from what I've researched, it's used a lot in VR as computer-generated content, because of course the process of creating that content allows you to place sound within an environment in specific areas. So you have far more control over the placement of audio. Whereas with traditional 360, you're a little bit more limited on how you actually set that up.
Well, what's the best kind of software then for, editing, 6.0 audio and 3D?
Well, we'll look at that in a minute in the post-production.
Okay.
So I'll talk you through like a couple of the programs that you can use to actually spatially place sound in an environment. So additional equipment, not much different really to any of the other video equipment that you would use. So selfie sticks. There is one thing that I will say about these is they're not very stable. So motion sickness, if you're using one of these with a 360 camera, is one of the big problems. But there are still, you can use what we call image stabilization. So a lot of cameras come with image stabilization now. So of course you would enable image stabilization, and a lot of people are using these selfie sticks to bring the audience with them as they wander around somewhere. But
doesn't that increase your pixels and everything?
It does mean the processing of the image is higher, but the big concern there is overheating of the camera.
Yeah, this is what you're talking about.
These tripods are useful in the sense that, so this isn't quite high enough, but
Bit wonky.
yeah. Try and find something with a spirit level, if you can. Tripod with a spirit level so that you can set the level correctly. But not quite. But these tripods are actually quite useful because when the camera is capturing below, if you've got a very large tripod, you've got more of an area that you need to hide in post. So if you have a very small area that is covered by the tripod legs, you've got less of an area that needs to be covered by.
Quite convenient as well if you've got a small area in which to film in if you're in a crowd or something like that.
Yes.
Not taking up like 2 square meters.
Yes, yeah. I've been on a few shoots where the tripod is larger than the person on the camera, taking up a lot of space. Whereas with 360, of course, you're trying to generate this false perspective that the audience is a character within that story or viewing the story from within it. And if they are too large or take up too much space, of course, it's that false perspective now. One interesting way that I've seen cameras mounted is actually using a mannequin. So as the audience is looking down, they can see the neck, chest, and bodily outline of a person, but it is just a mannequin. So I've seen that used a couple of times, and it's quite an interesting way of setting a camera up, really. It adds that extra immersive depth to the content. It gives them slightly more presence within it. But tripod like this works just as well. And then, of course, you've got things like gimbals, and gimbals are being developed for 360 video. And then you have to really think about boom poles if you're trying to position your camera up high, or if you need a boom for sound purposes. You think about lighting. Not all environments and not all cameras are good at picking up low light. So there is sometimes the necessity to have artificial light, so extra lighting rigs to fully light the environment. Smartphone, smart device to an iPad works just as well. I have an iPad mini at home, which I use quite often. That's just so you can preview what you're filming and then control the device itself without being next to it. And then SD cards and appropriate storer.
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 That's good.
But appropriate storage. As we talked about, there's a lot of data. So So depending on how long you're filming for, you have to think about on each shoot how long you're going to be shooting in each environment, on each shoot, and that will give you a better idea of how much SD card storage or external hard drive or anything like that you will require to save all of this content. So we've looked at how we actually film or record the audio. Playback devices, there are two variations of head-mounted display. So the head-mounted displays are what you've been using, Google Cardboards or the VR1, the Samsung Gear VR, PlayStation VR, Oculus Rift, HTC Vive. These are all playback devices that allow your audiences to watch the content as you have designed it. You'll probably hear them being referred to as HMDs. So you've got tethered, which are things like the Oculus Rift and HTC Vive, which require a computer, they require another piece of equipment to play back the media. So you'll find that Oculus Rift, for example, someone's using Oculus Rift, it's usually got a big cable that's connected to a computer somewhere. An interesting thing that my colleague who I work with went to see, she went to an art exhibit not so long ago, and the computer that they required to actually drive the Oculus Rift was in a backpack.
We saw that we went to that.
Oh, did you get to that? Yeah. But one of the problems with that is, of course, it's heavy, bulky. Most of these devices are already heavy and bulky as it is. And then you've got problems with power. You've got problems with the amount of people that can access the content at any one time. Because there was a time limitation on it. 6 minutes, yeah. So if you think about it, 6 minutes to look around an art exhibit doesn't really give you very much in the way of breathing room to really appreciate what you're viewing. But all of this is in development. So as time goes on, we may find that these are less expensive, because these are very expensive devices, and easier for audiences to access. So you may find that these become more used in the home than they currently are. But I mean, the gaming industry, for example, have been using this for quite some time, and Facebook, of course, own Oculus Rift. So they have a lot of interest in the content of doing this. But you have to think about how your audience is going to be viewing this content. As I keep saying, audience is paramount. If you can't make it accessible to your audience, if you're not targeting to your audience and creating content for them, then they're not going to be interested. So if you think that your audience is going to be able to have access to an Oculus Rift or an HTC Vive, then build content for that. But mobile is one of the biggest areas. So Samsung Gear, the VR1 headset which I've got there, so Samsung Gear of course works with Samsung devices. I've used it. I was actually surprised at how good it was. I've always been a bit sceptical of Samsung devices, but very, very good. And it has some form of interactive capabilities within it. So it has a form of interactive VR within it. It's just a press of the side of the HMD, but it's better than, say, the VR1, where you actually have to try and get to the device within it to tap it, or Google Cardboard, where you have to rely on the device being the correct size to fit it so that you can access the buttons. But Google Cardboard is mass manufactured, distributed. I've got an example here of a company. Oh, I did. Oh, yes. So Atticus, I keep referencing them, but there are other media organisations. This just happens to be the one that I went to recently. But they sent this to me. They manufactured this themselves. They just sent off and just asked to put their branding on basically with Google Cardboard. And this is constructed the same way as the Google Cardboard you've got. Empire magazine recently, for the release of Alien Covenant, released a special edition version of Empire magazine with a VR headset added to the pack. So they went with the 360 content they had specifically created for VR marketing promotional material for the Alien Covenant. Not hard to get hold of.
How much are they to buy?
To manufacture, I think. Last time I checked, you could probably pick one up from like Wilkinson's or, well, when Class Olson was around, I think they were about £5.
I think you can sometimes see them for a couple of quid.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. They're selling more.
But they're not hard to pick up. And if you can get your branding on them, it's a nice way of getting your audience to access the content you create, whilst also having your branding out there.
We started with cardboard ones and we found that because we were using them with the public, you worry about the phones falling out and getting damaged, but also they just wear out quite quickly.
Yes.
So we actually started using these, which are only 20-25 quid.
Oh, okay, yes, absolutely.
And they're just the hard, and they've got the button on.
Yeah.
So, and the phone's a lot more kind of secure in them. It's pretty, the difference between a couple of quid and 25 quid, but we're, using these all the time. And they're actually made by Mattel, they're for kids, which is kind of why we got them as well, because we're using them with young people. So we wanted something quite durable. If it gets dropped on the floor, that's kind of the worry.
Yeah. These are manufacturers now, lots of places do them. VR1 goggles that I've got there. One of the problems I found with those is they are specifically designed for an iPhone 6. I've got an iPhone 7 Plus. My phone is much bigger than that will take. So, of course, you've got the problem there. One of the benefits of Google Cardboard is pretty nondescript on what device you can put into it. But as they manufacture more and more of these, they are being more flexible in what devices fit into them. So they are becoming more accessible. And accessibility to this technology and this content, I think, was one of the main reasons why it didn't. It's taken a while for it to really start get going, because people have been looking into this for a few years now. And VR in itself, virtual reality, has been around for a long time. And of course, then you've got the web desktop viewer. So similar to what I showed you in the example at the very beginning, you can view 360 content in YouTube on a desktop. It's not the same experience, but you're still having that ability to view and look around in a setting that you wouldn't normally be able to do that. But it does mean that audiences that may not be able to access the content on a smart device can access it on a standard computer, on a web browser. Okay, so before we go on to production, any questions? Because we're aware of time. Has anyone got any questions in regards to technology? So the cameras, and then the devices you can use to record spatial audio, or then the playback devices, how audiences consume this media.
So in a cinema, would you have like...
In the cinema, there would be no screen. There would literally be no screen if you were using headsets in a cinema.
that kind of experience where you have has anybody done that yet? Where you have the audience and you've got like 3D sound with...
They are getting close to it.
It would be like a fairground ride in a way, wouldn't it? Because you'd have to be in a pod, wouldn't you?
There are a few experiences, like if you go to theme parks in America, they have experiences like that. But they are multi-sensory, so you have wind, rain, they are trying to get you to really experience it. In current UK cinemas, you've got something called 4D cinema,
Right.
which is literally just 3D cinema with extra sensory inputs such as water being dribbled on you, splashed on you, things like that. And there's a few film releases that are utilising that new form of output, but in relation to head-mounted display units and people sitting in a cinema without an actual screen, I don't think that's going to be a huge hit. But I don't know.
What about NASA? Have they used any of this space stuff?
I think training purposes they do use something. I know the army have been using virtual reality or augmented reality for a while.
For training?
For training purposes. I know that for learning tools, there are a lot of educational tools using VR for physics-based education, learning about the solar system, things like that. So students are able to experience
models.
Graphic models, but get up real
But
close.
it's not real. Like there's all these conspiracy theories about whether we went to the moon or not. Well, but over 360 up there.
Yeah, there's nothing.
It'd make a
nothing
bit
to
of
my
a difference,
knowledge.
isn't
Yeah,
it?
nothing to my
You know,
knowledge that's been created in relation to that. It'd be interesting if they did. If they sent a probe to Mars, it's like a 360 camera on it.
It would be very
that would be
interesting.
interesting. But I have a funny feeling there's a few problems in regards to actually doing that. But yeah, that might be the next stage. That might be the next step.
It'd be harder to stage anything, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it'd be experiencing definitely something we wouldn't normally be able to experience in our day-to-day lives. So production tips. These, as I said, are things that are very good. These aren't good. I'm not telling you and saying this is how you have to do it. This is my advice from stuff I've learnt, and if you want to follow my advice, then I think you might find it easier to create this kind of content. If you think my advice is not relevant, then fair enough. But these are a few key things that I have learnt through either experiencing doing this kind of content myself, or from talking to people or doing it through research. So, pre-production, I've always been a stickler for making sure that you plan anything correctly. So before you actually go out and start filming, make sure that you plan what it is you're trying to do. Think about how your audience is going to view this content, what you're planning on getting, why you're creating it. What's the story? What do you want them to be able to see? How are you going to direct the audience to particular things? Are you going to have a narrator that tells them what they're seeing as the story as it goes on, as they're viewing the content? Or is a character within it going to be speaking directly? So it could be an interviewee or a contributor, or it could be a reporter, it could be a sportsman, it could be anything. How are you going to direct them? How are you going to make sure that they're looking in a particular direction if they need to? And remember, we're storyboarding each scene, so each new shot has got this spherical 360 view. So what they're seeing standing in front of them could be amazing, but they look around and there's the production crew. Kind of defeats the purpose of the immersive feel of this medium. Sometimes it's unavoidable, but what you're trying to do is make them feel like this is a situation where they are the only person there, or they are there with another character. They're experiencing it as it happens, or as it did happen. Equipment you're going to be needing, so always plan out what you're going to be using, what camera you're going to be using, or what cameras. You may find that you need action cameras for particular things, and then a good high quality stationary camera for others. Audio, tripods, gimbals, things like that, how you're going to set this equipment up. Hidey holes, does anyone know what a hidey hole is?
But if you're going 360, you're going to have to hide certain games.
Yeah. So production crew, it's a shame I couldn't find the picture again, but there's a great picture online of a production team working on a 360 documentary film. I think it was Frontline. Frontline PBS creates some fantastic 360 documentaries. And you've got a behind the scenes image of them all hiding behind a boat in the middle of the desert, or in the middle of this sand, hiding behind this boat to hide from the 360 camera. So there's different ways of doing hidey holes. You can either actually hide out of sight of the camera whilst filming, or, as we'll look at, you can composite out a production team. That is something more in the creative industries, primarily because they've got a little bit more time and budget to do that kind of thing. But it's another way of creating an artificial hidey hole. One scene you've got the production team on one side and on one hemisphere, and then on the next shot you've got them on the other side. But it also means you can write things appropriately. Production roles always plan outcomes, who's doing what. I always find arguments start when you say, well, you were supposed to be responsible for the camera operation and making sure that the SD cards were there and it was all clear. I thought you were. Make sure everyone's clear on what their roles are, so you have to have someone who's managing the project, of course. And then knowing how long you're going to be on shoot for in a single day. If you're planning on shooting in 360 for 4 hours, make sure you've got adequate storage to actually keep all of that footage that you're going to be filming. It will make your lives a lot easier. Now, the actual camera element. Think of the camera as the person, or as a character within that story. A lot of, like some of the original 360 content I've seen, they had like a very small tripod like this. And they'd have the camera, we've got the Ricoh, so the Ricoh, and it was literally, to get a full 360 shot, you'd sometimes find them, camera, on the floor, there's my 360. What's the problem? If you're trying to get your audience to, it's a false aspect. All of a sudden, they are a very small person in a room of giants. So that does not give them the experience you want them to. Unless, of course, we're talking about things where we're trying to get them to experience a different perspective of life. So the first impressions content, of course, try to put them in the characterization of an infant. So placing the camera in that low down position gave them that perspective. But normally, for most content, you want it eye level. Think of this as a person. Think of this as a character within the story. This is your audience. Whether it be one person or 50,000, they're all looking through this. And they all want to see it in a particular way. You can make them feel very uneasy if, say for example, one of the best examples I've ever heard, and I believe it was YouTube with their How to Shoot 360, was the difference between being part of a scene, so a member of something like a table, so you're sitting there with a lot of the characters, or being the food. You place the camera on the table and have everyone so that you can see all around you. Oh, I can see everyone's face, it's great. All of a sudden, you've got people reaching in, grabbing the food, grabbing something. You are suddenly the food. Creatively, that could work, but if I'm watching through, that can make me feel very uneasy as I've got giant people looming in towards me. But if you position the camera in the same way that you would have an they're no longer under your feet and uneasy because they just feel like they're part of the scene, they're part of that setting. So keeping camera eye level. Think about how your audience is going to be viewing this content. So head-mounted displays will also give you a better idea of where you need to position the camera, how the camera should be placed. So if you shoot some preliminary footage before you actually start filming properly and play it back on a head-mounted display, you'll see exactly what the audience is going to see. And sometimes you'll find that you may need to make changes to how you've planned that shot because it may not work. Be mindful of intimate places. You don't want to make them feel claustrophobic or uneasy unless you really want them to feel that way. 6x9. But think of it like in the sense of a crowded room. If you've got lots of people coming really close to the camera, all of a sudden the audience is going to start feeling uneasy. It's almost like if you were standing in the room and then everyone started getting really close to your face. You don't want to make the audience feel uneasy because they're not going to really understand the story, they're not going to understand the content.
They always use that shot when somebody's been taken in the loony bin. And the nurse it's that
but for creative effect, that's it. Whereas in 360, of course, if you've got lots of people like squeezing past the camera or squeezing past the audience, then all of a sudden they're getting really claustrophobic and that can be really unsettling. So be aware of intimate spaces. If you're going to film in somewhere that's got a huge crowd, try and make sure you are positioned so that you can at least divert people away from the camera with enough space so that it feels natural.
Can I just have, like say with, interchangeable lens camera, you've got wide angle, you've got, do you get that same? You don't get that same kind of adaptive.
It is a single depth field.
What is it? Is it equivalent to like 50, 55 What?
It does depend on the camera. I would probably say you'll most commonly find about 35.
So could it evolve that you had like?
It could, yeah. I don't see why it couldn't.
That.
Yeah, I don't see why it couldn't. I have seen a few made 360 rigs which are using multiple digital SLRs as a 360 rig filming video, but of course then it's similar to what a GoPro rig. But then it takes up all space. You've got issues in terms of making sure that each of the cameras are working at the appropriate time, they're all set to the correct settings, things like that. But I can see it developing that way where you'll have interchangeable
lenses. Because it would make sense, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Generally speaking, with using, if you're interviewing someone in 360, position them between 5 and 8 feet away from the camera gives enough of a distance to make it feel natural. If you're talking to someone normally, I don't usually stand right up close to them like this and talk to them. Arm's length or 5 to 8 feet is a good distance, just because it keeps that personal space. Remember, if they're viewing this on a head-mounted display, that's now their personal space. If someone starts getting into their personal space, that becomes very, very, well, I don't like it. I can't imagine many people do. Placing the camera as well in a stable position. When this content was first being produced, a lot of people were complaining about motion sickness. The reason that most of them were complaining about motion sickness is the video content they were watching had usually the camera moving around in some way. So if someone had it on a selfie stick, can you imagine watching on a head-mounted display, Google Cardboard, anything like that? You've got someone walking along like that with the 360, you're at the end of this stick, bobbing along. but your body's not moving. What your eyes are seeing is not what's happening to the rest of you. And that's where you start feeling seasick, where you start feeling that motion sickness. Because your brain is seeing one thing, your body is seeing another, is feeling another, so it doesn't compute, it doesn't correspond. There are situations where 360 cameras on cars or boats can work, but at high speeds, high velocities, you're still going to have a big issue with motion sickness. But it's that issue, I don't think it's ever going to go away. People are still going to feel motion sick when viewing this kind of content, but nice slow movements will help accommodate more, a larger audience, and stop them from feeling sick when viewing your content.
There's also that file size overload with the
cameras overheating as well is a big problem with it's trying to compute too much motion within the frame, things like that. So Formula One at the moment, unless you're going to purchase a huge jaunt camera, one that is professionally designed, then you'll probably find that cameras will overheat and you'll probably get about a couple of minutes worth of content before the camera's unusable. But slow, steady movements. As I said before, most of these cameras now are being released with image stabilization or the ability to stabilize an image at post. So even if you've got someone moving with 360 camera, as long as it's not too severe, you can usually stabilize the image so it's a more fluid motion, so it's easier for people to consume, it's easier for people to watch. Using natural perspective lines and natural lines to draw your audience into key areas for them to focus on things. So stairs is one of the things that I usually think of. If you've got lots of stairs going around, those perspectives will draw them across those lines. So you could have someone sitting on some stairs and those natural lines will draw your audience in to look at that person at some point. They may be looking from one way over or that way across. So using natural lines to draw your audience in is useful. Consider lighting requirements and sound. So if you need additional lighting, think about how you're going to then hide that if required. You can do it in post or you can use hidey holes, like I said. But sometimes different shoots require additional requirements such as lighting. For example, if I was shooting in this room, certain cameras wouldn't pick up very well in low light areas, so you on the far left hand side wouldn't be picked up very well. So I'd have to light this room additionally. These lights, even if it's just standard in-house lights like this, if it adds extra light, then it's a benefit. And then of course, sound-wise, we talked about additional equipment for sound. H2N is £120 and they record in spatial sound. So, audio then. When on a shoot, we've talked slightly about several audio recorders for ambient sound, so sound on B-roll or just general shots. But if you're interviewing someone in a 360 environment, they need to be positioned, as I said, at an arm's length or 5 to 8 feet away from the camera, dependent on your requirements really. If it's a really noisy environment, of course they need to stand a little bit closer to the camera, or if you want them to be a bit more intimate, then they go a bit closer, but 5 to 8 feet. And 5 to 8 feet means the camera or the additional device you're using to pick up audio may not pick them up clearly. So you'll lose the clarity and intelligibility of the voice. And people will struggle then to hear what they're trying to say. But some wireless packs will help with that immediately. They cost, on average, between £250 to £400 for wireless packs, but you can get single Bluetooth lapel mics. They clip onto someone's shirt, and the clarity of the voice, because it is directional, it will only pick up voice. The majority of them are directional, but they will pick up the closest object, which will be your contributor interviewee. Ambisonic we've talked about, which is the ability to record sound in a 3D environment, so you've got that 3D spatial sound. So again, if you have the capacity to do that, that may be something that you want to look at, because it gives you that extra depth. And upmixing from stereo, if you are recording in stereo, so some of the cameras only record stereo, so they already have 2 microphones rather than 4, or 2 inputs rather than 4, then you can upmix. So you can take those 2 channels and then just duplicate it so that it is front left and right, rear left and right, but you delay it so that it sounds like a reflection from behind. And as long as there's nothing distinct that is going on behind you, that will usually work.
How can you, is there a way of recording wireless straight into the 360 camera, or do you need to sync it up afterwards?
Some cameras will allow you to have external sources direct into the camera. Not all of them do. I'm trying to remember if the Kodak does. No, Kodak doesn't. There are a few cameras that do allow you to record audio direct onto the footage, so it's auto synced. But if you're using a H2N or you're using wireless, of course you'll have to then sync the audio to the footage. So the easiest way of doing that is clap in front of the camera. I say in front of the camera, we're in 360 cameras, there is no fun. But clap somewhere in the scene so that you can see that sync point, and you can sync the audio to the video then. And a lot of LEDs, so editing systems, have a process called auto sync, so they will automatically sync to either the waveform, if you've got audio coming from the camera as well, or to the time code. So if it's set up correctly, it will sync to the time code of the video and audio. Health and safety, not exactly exciting, but needs to be talked about. So health and safety, just some things to consider really when shooting in 360. Are you going to notify the general public of the fact that you're filming in 360? Because not everyone wants to be picked up on film, so you have to make that. That's more of an ethical concern, but as well as that, with 360 cameras, if people see a camera, they'll immediately come up and wonder, what's going on, what are you filming, is it filming me now? And not everyone's comfortable with that. So you sometimes need to think about whether or not if you are going to notify the general public that you are filming in 360 if you are in a public place. How will you protect equipment from unwanted attention? So they're not, most of these cameras aren't big, huge devices. They're not the same as like bringing out a broadcast camera into the general public. If you see BBC or ITV film crews, immediately they start attracting attention because they've got this huge equipment being used and everyone's interested in what they're doing. 360 cameras, on the other hand, are not as abrupt in terms of how much space they take up, or it's not immediately identified that it is a camera most of the time. But people will still be interested in the fact that if you're trying to set something up, they'll be interested in what you're doing. So, and there are occasions where maybe you don't want that kind of attention. And how are you going to protect the public, crew and cast or contributors from potential hazards? So this is General Health and Safety 101. Cables, electrical, water, tripping hazards, slipping hazards, any of that, same as if you do any sort of filming, you have to think about all of these factors. You're not only protecting, it's not about the equipment at the end of the day, it's about your health and safety and the health and safety of others around you. but it's indicative of the equipment because, of course, if a camera is wet, and it's plugged into the main, someone goes to grab it, immediate problem there, they've got a new head. But you've got to just think about these things. They're all aspects that will keep you safe. Okay, so what I want to do. We'll go through, before we go through post-production and what you need to think about when creating content for output, does anyone have any questions in regards to the actual filming aspect? So pre-production, so planning, and then the actual filming of the content and the equipment, how to use it, and some tips on how to use it. Everyone okay? Yep. So, post-production. Not all content will need this. You may find that the content you create is specifically for social media to be uploaded direct. So once you have filmed your content in 360, you can upload it direct to social media through specific third-party or manufacturer apps for mobile devices. Alternatively, you can use post-production to enhance the experience of the end user. So the first stage of this is something called video stitching. And most devices will stitch video content together on the camera. But for highest quality, you'll find that it will actually create two videos. So say I've got this camera and then I've got the second camera next to it. They are two different video sources, but they are only single hemisphere. So if I'm going to create a full 360, of course, it needs to be combined. And that is what video stitching is. Majority of manufacturers will provide you with programs to do this on PC or Mac. For example, Kodak have their own stitching software. It's quite good. I've used it myself. I'll show you the content I created using that. But you've also got AutoPano, Video Pro, by Color, which is very good, very, very good piece of software. But that will cost you. You can get a trial version of it. I would show you it on my system, but I'm currently saving the trial for a project I am doing myself. Or you've got Aura Video Stitch Studio, which is another third-party software which works in a similar way. But it's taken the two pieces of video and combined them into a full spherical video content that can be then edited in an NLE.
So basically, you can't do that bit in your usual suspects like Premiere or
No, not at the moment. I anticipate they will be bringing out plugins that allow you to do that, but
not yet.
Not yet, because most manufacturers produce their own software that allows you to do it. That's usually good enough. If you need a more professional result, then things like Color, AutoPano, Video Pro will have better quality stitching, just because it gives you far more advanced control over how you stitch.
This should change with time, though.
It will change with time. But at the moment, as we're talking about it now, they are one of the two best stitch programs out there. But for very simple stitching and video content, what manufacturers produce is good enough, and most of the devices they said currently on the market will stitch internally on the device itself, so they can be uploaded direct or edited. So editing wise, let's just, if I show you what I have done. So editing of content can be edited. It can be edited on any video editor. So if you're used to Final Cut, great, still edit it on Final Cut. If you're a Premiere user, great, carry on using Premiere. There are other alternatives. So if you're looking for a free video editor, there is oh, I always forget the name.
Lightworks.
No,
You do it on Lightworks.
no, not in Nightware. DaVinci Resolve. I always forget it. So DaVinci Resolve, you can get a free license of DaVinci Resolve for basic editing. It works in a very simple way, very similar to if you ever used Final Cut. Works in a similar way to that, but it's quite straightforward. If you've ever edited video before, DaVinci Resolve is a very good program to download and have together. But it doesn't matter what you use, at the end of the day the content can still be edited the same. So, for example here is,
So when you look at that, can I just ask you, have you tried it in Blender?
I haven't used Blender for a while, to be honest with you.
With 3D, should
Yeah, I haven't used it for a while because I've been using Unity instead.
is that open source?
You can get a free license of Unity, yeah, it's a personal license. So, just an example of what, I know it's difficult to see, but I've used this one camera, but I've filmed twice, just turned the camera 180 to face it the other way. So this would be what you may find, if you look online, they talk about it for the film industry and creative sectors, is they'll film 360 one side, have the
Or 180?
180, and then have the film crew on one side of the shot, and then they'll flip the camera around and film the other side. It's at different times, but if there's nothing major going on in the other frame, of course they can write it correctly, they can fix it so that you no longer see as the film crew, it feels like no one other than maybe the character that you were supposed to be focusing on is there. Doesn't always work, but it is an interesting tip that I picked up from talking to some people who are working in the creative sectors, working in 360. So, 360 video standardly is filmed like this. It looks like this. So, that is what that sphere, that dome is picked up. The one thing I like about, I like many things about Premiere, but one of the benefits of using Premiere as an editing system is they've actually developed it now to incorporate aspects of VR preview. So you can preview your content as it would be viewed maybe on a desktop or on a head-mounted display. So at the moment, for other systems you have to download third-party plugins, but Premiere has this built in. And I can now look around. Now, one of the problems is, because it's now trying to see it as a VR, it's got these pinch points where it's combined, trying to make the sphere out of this single hemisphere recording. But I can still look around. It's not amazing because, of course, the size of it is a bit small. But I can do that with, so I've got the two separate files here. I wouldn't be able to combine those in Premiere. They're useless unless I stitch them together. And the final stitched piece is this. So this is what the final. Turn it on VR. So the final VR video. There we go. Looks like this. So it's a very small display, but I can navigate around and I can see a full spherical image. One of the problems with stitching is, of course, because you're taking two separate video clips and trying to combine them to create that full scale, stitching creates what we call stitch lines, where if you can, you might be able to make it out. Yeah. So you can just about see my shirt or my arm disappear into nothing, because the stitch line there is where the two videos are overlapping. So the stitch lines sometimes lose material. So you'll sometimes find that you're watching a 360 video of someone, and they get worse the closer you are to the camera majority of the time. You'll find if someone's really close to the camera and walks through a stitch line, it's almost like their face disappears partially and then reappears on the other side, like they're being folded. And stitch lines are one of the biggest problems, so always be aware that that stitch line, unless you've got plenty of time to sit there and work on the content, there will always be a stitch line of some sort. But if you take the time and try and manoeuvre the content around, then stitch lines become less apparent. But it's one of the big problems with using two lenses, is the fact that you've got two items that need to be combined, and they have to be combined in a way that may create these stitch lines. But some of the professional programs I was talking about are very good at hiding those stitch lines. Even the GoPro rigs, the expensive rigs, they have huge problems with stitch lines, because it's multiple cameras all picking up different elements and then merging together. And unless it's done well, it can look horrendous. Keep your edit simple. Something that someone told me not so long ago with 360 or VR or anything like that. Create simple content that focuses on the story. You don't want fancy edits, you don't want fancy cuts to action sequences and things like that, because it doesn't always follow what you want the audience to experience. It doesn't work in the same way as traditional video editing, because your audience may not be looking in one way at one particular time when you want them to. They may not be focusing on the point you want them to at that moment. So they could miss the big explosion, look around after they hear the sound, and all of a sudden all they see is a puff of smoke. Whereas what you wanted them to see was the explosion itself. And cutting multiple times, so with action sequences, every time a new action is, you cut to a new scene, you get closer and closer to it. That can be very disorientating in 360, because remember, your audience are playing a part of the character within the story. You don't find that you usually, if you're watching someone do something, you don't suddenly find that you're getting closer and closer and closer. And it can be really disorientating if you're forcing the audience to do that with 360. So keep it simple. One environment, stable shot, let your audience look around themselves, don't try and force them into anything unless you are trying to guide them. You're not forcing them into anything, guide them to focus points, guide them to look in directions. Think about the effects you're going to use, image stabilization, color correction, grading, things like that. Transitioning between shots, a lot of the people I've spoken to have said fade to blacks are best. Traditional cuts, straight, pardon?
Dissolve.
Yeah, dissolves work, but straight cuts don't tend to work. They can be quite disorientating. So fade to blacks work because you're transitioning, you're telling them we are going somewhere else.
And dissolves work.
Yeah. Add in text overlays, it depends on what kind of dissolve. Circular dissolves, I've been told, work better than most.
Circular,
Yeah, for 360.
rather than just, it's usually cross dissolve
Yeah.
when you use.
Yeah, but it's circular dissolve, if I remember correctly. Yeah, circular is what I was told. But most of them will find the fade to blacks. They'll fade briefly to black and then fade into the next one. Add in text overlays. You can add text to sequences the same way you can do with any video content. If you want it to stand out and add depth, of course you have to create 3D text elements, but that's extra time that you need. But they can be created in After Effects, or you can create them in Photoshop and then import them into your video project. So, no different to creating these kind of elements for any other video content. Compositing, I've said before about compositing, so say for example, you've got a tripod underneath the camera, you've got your H2N audio recorder beneath the camera as well, and you want to hide the fact that this equipment is there. By compositing, you can effectively have your brand where that tripod is. So you have a graphical overlay that overlays on top of that to hide it. I'll see if I can get a quick example of
I thought you mean like green and red with screen, whatever. You know, you'd like have to have the whole room, the ceiling, the floor, everything would have to be green, wouldn't it? Doing composting.
No, because in post, of course, you can just overlay graphical content on top of the sequence. So you're just layering that graphic on top of the video and placing it. Let's see. Can't remember if they have this. No, they've just got a stitch line. So this is the Mosul 360.
But this one is being flown by two.
Let's see if they have done what. They've actually been quite creative in this. Is they've composited just a black graphic, a black space, black object to hide the tripod or how the camera is mounted. But you'll find like certain 360 videos, they'll have their brand in there. So it could be CNN, or you could have CBS News, PBS, things like that, frontline. And they'll use that space, they'll composite a flattened image over this to hide the tripod, but add their brand into it.
Is that in Premiere or?
You can do that in Premiere, you can do that in Final Cut.
How do you position text and overlays in essentially 3D space? How do you tell it where to be?
Well, with things like Final Cut, it's not a VR experience. It will preview the video. If I turn off VR in Premiere, you'll be able to see. So the video is shown in this equirectangular view. So you literally position the circle, like a semicircle, in the area that you want to hide it. And then once that's combined into 360, it should join that semicircle together, and that's how then you composite that area out. So you just have to think of it in terms of a flattened globe, really. But
Can you use the Adobe Premiere app, or is it just the desktop?
just the desktop.
Okay.
Just the desktop.
I think like, you should just have to wade in there and have a go at it, don't you? Have a bash at it.
Yeah,
really,
having a go is always
you
the
know.
best way of learning this kind of process. Before I really started getting into this, I'd never worked with it before. The amount of stuff I've learned just by playing is amazing. Now, exporting content. When you export your content, compositing and text, both of which can be done using third-party applications. There is a program called Metal Skybox, which is, it will cost you some money, but it is specifically designed for VR and 360 content and editing of that content. So creating text elements for 360. Standard text elements will appear in 360 video, but Metal Skybox is designed to create depth and 3D elements for it. Going back to exporting content, when you're exporting your content for play out on YouTube or Facebook, you have to make sure that it is exported for VR. And it requires metadata to do that. In Premiere, I'll just use Premiere as an example because it's what I've created this content on. Premiere has actually added the ability to specify that this is video. So under video, Premiere has got the function of being able to add metadata to video content so that when it goes onto YouTube or Facebook, it recognises the fact that this is virtual reality, 360 content. You can get plugins, so third-party plugins for other NLEs which will do the same thing, or you can get third-party programs which are metadata injectors, 360 metadata injectors. You load the video in an MP4 format into these programs. It will inject the correct data, the metadata, into the video content. That can be then uploaded straight to YouTube. Within 5 minutes of the video being uploaded, it's processed it, and it knows it's 360 and it can be viewed in a 360 environment. Yeah.
Go first.
Do you have a question, guys?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, what's the frame rate? Have you got variable frame rates, or is it one standard frame rate?
Different cameras have different frame rates, yeah.
Really?
Depends on the quality that's it's being shot in.
So, in what range, you know?
Well, 4K, 30 frames per second standardly. So 4K upwards. The Garmin camera I'm waiting on is
60, like 60?
1920, but of course the image quality is reduced dramatically because it's 1920 but over a sphere rather than
Plus it's
single.
temperature.
Yeah.
So it's relatively low frame rates, considering
Yes,
Yeah.
but that's going to improve as the
technology
technology
evolves.
improves, yeah. Anything else? So MP4 exports, and make sure that it is the metadata is added for VR 360 so that it can be viewed appropriately in YouTube or Facebook 360 or wherever it's going. Okay, I'm not going to read through all of these live streaming tips, but live streaming is, as I said, something that's started to take off, and these are actually tips I've taken from Facebook themselves. So the people who pretty much pioneered it or started pushing on it, anyways. These are the tips that they are giving you if you want to try 360 live streaming. Have a look through those. They are on the slides I've given you and on the printouts I've given you as well, but they are direct from the industry, so I can't elaborate on more on those. Now, before we actually do finish up, because I'm never aware of time, and I haven't quite done what I was hoping, but VR and computer-generated experiences. We'll touch on this briefly because it's something in development. Computer game industry is using it a lot, of course. Journalism has dabbled in it slightly, but as a learning tool, they use this kind of thing for it's great as a way of training people on how to use specific pieces of equipment, specific processes. They actually interact with environments without the danger of it going wrong. So, the first thing really is to talk about, now because we were focused on 360 video, I thought we'd touch on adding interactivity to 360. So interactive capabilities of 360. This has only started really in the industry in the last year or so, but real estate, medicine, engineering, architecture, this is relevant to pretty much everyone. Hotspots are a way of adding digital overlays or digital content, additional content to 360 video. Now, it initially started as 360 photos having hotspot elements within them, so you can click on them and it will open up additional information, will take you to a video piece or will take you to a new destination. Got a couple of examples I'll show you in a second. But they are classed as interactive hotspots, and they can only be clicked on a desktop, which is the standard way, or recently they've started developing it so that with head-mounted displays and a smartphone, so those of you who use YouTube, you'll notice there's a little dot that indicated where your focus point was, where it is that you could then tap to interact with the YouTube functions. Same process can be used for hotspots. And I've been looking into this a lot because it really is interesting for digital storytelling, because does anyone remember those books where you could actually progress the story in different ways by choosing different actions? The idea I've got for the project I'm working on is using that same concept but with 360 video and digital hotspots to allow an audience to develop a story in their own way. So they can advance it in different ways and have different outcomes dependent on the choices they make. But using hotspots, so they don't rely on a full VR rig, they can still use their smartphones and access it on their sofa in the middle of the house with Google Cardboard. It does require some coding and some understanding of particular computer game specialist programs, but there are companies who can do this for you, and a couple of those, well, one of those is a company called Omnivert, and this example is of a estate agent, and it has the capability of turning into a full VR, fully immersive VR experience. Well, I say fully immersive, a VR experience for head-mounted displays, but we'll look at it in standard flattened and play it. So it will automatically progress and skip to the next video, but didn't want to do that. There we go. But instead of actually having to wait for him to finish, I can click on this hotspot. It will take me to the next video. And I'm progressing. I'm slowly going further and further into this house. I can go upstairs. I don't have to follow that set path. I can go where I want to go.
So we just come up the stairs and we're now into the landing
I
area.
can look at the bedrooms.
So would it normally just kind of go on the
It
way
will just-
in the
it will-
order that he
yeah.
did it?
It would play in the order that he walked through that house. So they've edited the video to get the 360 video together, but then added these hotspots to allow the audience to progress in their own way and look at different elements. And there are
Sorry, do you edit in it? What is that? Is that just like a viewer player, or do you edit it in the Omnivert
So
or is there software or-
Omnivert is a company that you can then get to add these hotspots.
Okay.
You can discuss with them about access to their software, but from what I can tell, they like to just work with you on these projects to get it set up as with them doing most of the development side of it. There are other programs that allow you to do this. So, I don't think this one's going to work, but there is, if you look up Dubai 360, there is a interactive hotspots content which allows you to explore Dubai and get additional information, and it will bring up pictures, it will bring up extra information on what you've clicked on, things like that, all part of a 360 video. But you can create this through Unity, so if you want to do it yourself, I said if you want to learn Unity, it's free to download a personal license. You can then look at their video tutorials, and there's a lot of online tutorials which will show you how to create this kind of 360 hotspot experience and add interactive features to 360 video. That's all I've done, is I've learned Unity to look in YouTube videos. Colour, so again Colour have a program called Panotour Pro, which is primarily for still images, but they are developing it for video content as well. And as I said, Omnivert, which is an external company which will do it for you. But that's like kind of the first stepping stone into full CG immersive VR experiences. I personally think this is where 360 is going, because you've got that interactive nature, but you are not relying on huge amounts of equipment. People can still view it on their smart devices, but they have the opportunity to get extra information on things. 3D or CG VR journalism is, as I said, huge. I can probably talk to you about this for a week, but just a brief overview really. It's a fully immersive experience. It's currently primarily used for video games. It's created using specialist games engines like Unity or Unreal, and it's designed to be experienced in VR head-mounted display units such as the Oculus Rift or PlayStation VR or even the HTC Vive. Have you had a go with the HTC? Because you said you've got the HTC. Have you had a go with it? Yeah? So, your personal opinion on the HTC? What do you think? Yeah? I've used the HTC and the Oculus, and it took me at least 2 goes to get used to the prospect of, if I see a table in front of me, it's not actually there. There was about 3 separate occasions where I dropped the controllers because I thought the table was there. But you get used to it eventually. But it is really interesting what they're trying to do with this kind of technology. They're branching out of just the games industry and trying to develop it for other areas because of the nature of it. Medical industry, for example, this ability to interact with different medical procedures without actually having to do it on a person. You've got that ability to train people without needing them to be in an environment that maybe not safe. You need to consider, when planning these kind of things, the role of the user within the story. Who are they? The amount of media required to create this. It can be quite a big project. What interactivity will there be? Are they going to be able to just, like the Chernobyl one I showed you, that was a full VR experience, but they were just able to wander around Chernobyl. They were able to explore. Or are they just able to pick elements up and put them down or interact with different things within it? Will the user be able to explore the environment? And what is the final aim? What are you aiming the audience to be able to do? What is the final experience? What do you want them to come away with When creating, you can create this type of experience using, so you have to create assets within it. These are all kind of things that if you try with Unity you'll learn, but a table, for example, you can download something that's pre-made, it's a table, you place it into this environment, there it is. It doesn't look real, it looks computer generated, but that element's there. The other way of doing it, if you want photorealism within your VR 3D experience, then of course you need to create 3D assets using photos, and this is photogrammetry. Yeah. I was never too sure how to say that. Photogrammetry, which is taking images, still images of an item at different angles, and then creating 3D object from those, overlaying that image. It just means that it looks more realistic. It's more time intensive, but you get that photorealism. I said earlier, Unity and Unreal are two gaming engines. You can get free licenses for them. Unity is the one I'm currently using. And then there's tutorials online to have a look at how you use them. However, if you want to just see how VR can work for you before we finish up, have a look at cospaces.io. It is a simple, free, online, basically a developer kit that allows you to create VR experiences. It's designed for basic learning tool for students, but it's a great way of experiencing how to create this fully immersive, computer-generated type content. So it might be the thing to have a look at is cospaces.io. It's a nice place to start. And that is it. I was hoping that I'd have time to at least get you to go out and shoot with a couple of the 360 cameras so you can actually see how the content's put together. Sadly, we ran out of time, but if you are interested in experimenting with this, you've got my email address, I believe. I'm quite happy. Pardon?
Where's your email address?
If not, you've got my Twitter handle.
Where? In the email that was sent out. Why don't you
I
just
will,
give it to us?
I'll provide it. I'll give it to you next time.
Yeah.
But,
I'm sure everybody's got it.
if you are interested in it, you can email me and I can always point you in the direction of where to look, and we can look at actually how you use it with that particular piece of equipment, or you can always, if you ever got time, pop in and I can always come out with you and we can look at it at an individual level. I don't mind doing that. Okay?
Thank you.
Lovely. Thanks everybody for coming. Make sure, I think everybody's got one of these phones that JT handed out. Make sure we.
Yes, could I have all?
Thanks everybody online for watching. See you again next time. Bye bye.